You're listening to Scary Sleep Stories presents The Dark Hours.
Welcome, guys. I know a lot of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before you drift off like the video, subscribe if you're new, and comment what time it is right now. Let's see who's still awake and who's not alone tonight. Let's begin. Story 1. The Prism at Dead Lake. Dead Lake was a place people only whispered about in the mining town where my grandmother grew up. The lake had no outflow and no inlet, just a black crown of water glimmering in the sag between two ancient mountains. In midsummer, it reflected nothing but the moon. In winter, it groaned beneath a skin of ice, never freezing solid, always hiding something underneath. When my brother Ethan vanished the summer I turned 18, everyone said he had simply run away, bored with work and small-town grit. But the lake had always called to him a siren song disguised as murky water and whispered urban legend. I couldn't erase the feeling that Lake Orrin wasn't just a backdrop, but the very stage where the final act of our family's story had played out. 10 years later, restless and drifting after my divorce, I came back to clear out our grandfather's house. Boxes dusted with years, a stack of yellowed maps, and one nearly illegible letter written in Ethan's hand pulled me closer to the edge of an old obsession. If you want to know, the letter read, wait by the lake at the thin hour. Locals called it the Prism Hour, a brief moment just before sunrise when bands of rainbow light would flicker across the lake's surface, warping the air and making it impossible to tell where water ended and sky began. Old-timers claimed it was when the living might glimpse the dead, or at least the shadows of those lost. Curiosity warred with dread. On a rain-blunted morning, I packed my grandfather's battered flashlight, Ethan's compass, and some foolish hope, and drove the old road past rotting fence posts and hollow-eyed barns to Dead Lake. Fog clung to the tree line, muffling the world. Every step crunched with ice and memory. The closer I came to the shore, the less sound there was. Birds hushed, water unbroken, the woods holding their breath. I waited as gray gave way to nearly dawn. In that empty space, I felt eyes on me, cold, patient, older than the lake itself. Then the prism began. Light fractured the surface, color slicing across my boots, bending tree trunks into melting brushstrokes. My mind buzzed, every sense alight, every muscle warning me to run, but I stayed. And as the last purple ribbon flickered out, something in the water changed. A shape lifted from the depths. Not a person, not quite an animal, but a moving absence denser even than the opaque water. It stopped just inches from the surface, where the patterns of the rainbow had pooled. From the water rose a single perfect object, a crystal or faceted stone, the size of my fist, spinning in the morning air. I held out my hand, hypnotized, and it settled, impossibly light, into my palm. The moment I touched it, images stormed my mind, the lake in all seasons. Children playing in ghostly echoes, miners in old boots trudging home, shadows crossing their faces. Then, Ethan, older now, his smile sharp and wild. "Don't lose the memory," he whispered in my ear, though he wasn't behind me. "Dead Lake keeps what it wants unless you remember what was real." I staggered back, nearly dropping the prism. The world righted itself, fog dispersing as if exhaled in relief. I was alone again, except for the shallow prints at the waterline and the prism heavy in my pocket. Over the coming weeks, strange things happened. At night, I dreamed in color-vivid, painful memories that didn't belong to me. Hands scrabbling in cold water, laughter turning to cries, the cold weight of something pulling me down. I started waking with river mud beneath my nails. The air in the house thickened. My grandfather's clocks all stopped at 5. 17. The moment sunrise split the lake. Faces appeared in mirrors when I blinked, dissolving before I could focus. My phone filled with unsent messages from Ethan repeating, "Not gone, just cross the lake, come at dawn." Trying to break the pattern, I brought the prism to town, showing it to anyone who would listen: historians, shopkeepers, even Father Paul at St. Mary's. None remembered Ethan's face. Some even stared through me, as if the question itself pulled them away. I took to walking by Dead Lake nightly, scanning the water with the prism in my coat. Whenever moonlight hit its facets, the water swarmed with silver fish shapes that darted away when I drew close, always keeping me one step removed from the truth. One night, exhausted and near despair, I dozed by the lake's edge. When I woke, I was certain utterly, without doubt, that Ethan sat beside me. We didn't speak the language of waking people, but I understood. Regret, longing, apology. He couldn't cross back unless I helped. "The prism," he gestured, pointing to the lake's inky heart. "What do you want?" I finally demanded aloud. The water shuddered. In the air above, swirling shapes, faces of all those lost, blinking, waiting. Whispered words trickled like ice. "There's a doorway. It opens for those who see. Close it or never leave." Before I could weigh fear or loyalty, I hurled the prism into the lake's depths. The water boiled new light, knifing the surface, turning the black mirror into a storm of fractured shapes. Frogs screamed, trees bent, shadows scattered upward like flocking birds. Then, silence. I woke the next morning with the smell of mud and sun. Ethan's compass clutched in my fist. My phone buzzed a new message. Simply, "I remember. Thank you." The lake never gave up a body, but the fog lifted for good that season. The clocks in the old house ticked again. Time unstuck. I never dreamed of the rainbow lights or of Ethan again. But sometimes, during the prism hour, when the first rainbow fingers touch the water, I walk the bank of Dead Lake and see my reflection beside another, both of us alive and whole, and feel a peace I never thought I'd find. Because some lakes keep their secrets, and some are kept only until someone remembers enough and lets go, so the living and the lost can finally part. Story 2. The Echoes of Marrow Hill. If the old townsfolk were to be believed, Marrow Hill was a place where lost sounds gathered a strange knot of earth and stone on the edge of the world, thick with roots and memory. It was here, years after he had left in anger and shame, that Isaac Mallory returned carrying only a battered suitcase, a half-finished symphony in his head, and a promise whispered to his dying mother: finish the house and find the truth about what happened to his brother. Marrow Hill was the last remnant of a mining town subsumed by forest. The lanes were rutted with moss. Fog swam over the marshes, and the air always tasted a bit like iron and river stones. The house, built by Isaac's grandfather and left to ruin after the family shattered, squatted between leaning birches as though bracing against time itself. In childhood, Isaac had dreamed of marble halls, music carried on the wind, and laughter under lantern light. Now, gutted windows winked darkly back. The roof bowed with algae, and ivy had forced its way inside like green blood through old veins. Isaac's plan was simple: restore the house enough to sell, clear the last chapter of the family's legacy, and never return. But the woods had other ambitions. The night he arrived, owls swooped through fog so thick it muffled his footsteps, and a sudden hush pressed on his chest as if an audience held its breath. Inside, the rooms were chaotic echoes of the past faded sepia portraits, burned letters, a child's music box caked with dust. The din of the city faded from Isaac's mind, replaced by a memory of an old tune his mother would hum when she thought her children slept. Each night he worked scraping wallpaper, hauling out broken chairs, patching holes. The silence deepened. By midnight he found himself standing still in the halls, heart hammering, straining to catch the faintest sound. On the second night, he heard the first echo. At first, he thought it the wind, a far-off cry warping through cracked glass. But as he paused by the ruined staircase, the sound grew clearer. A string of piano notes, hesitant and plaintive, bleeding from somewhere, just out of sight. Isaac followed the tune, heart thrumming with that blend of terror and longing only familiar houses produce. The melody led him down to the cellar, where embers of family legend rested his brother Eli's shoes, a rusted plowshare, a cassette recorder with a tape inside. Isaac pressed play. What came was not music, but whispers, layered voices, murmuring confessions, pleas, and names. "Have you come to listen?" a voice finally asked, so like his own that he staggered backward. Shaken but determined, Isaac resolved to catalog every sound. Sure, it was just stress or the madness of solitude. He set up microphones, armed his phone with a field recorder, and spent dawn to dusk cleaning, painting, and mapping the odd acoustics of Merrow Hill's old bones. The next morning, his equipment glitched. Files were corrupted, and every new recording contained something extra. At the rise and fall of his breathing, Isaac would hear faint footsteps, laughter, and chillingly a child's cry, the same cadence he would imagine his brother Eli had still used if he'd survived into adulthood. As days blurred, Isaac's sense of time unraveled. He'd pass from room to room muttering, humming the old melody, finding that in some corners his voice wavered, split, and echoed back, sometimes higher or lower, sometimes out of sequence, like a conversation delayed through water. Old neighbors visited in ones and twos. Mrs. Beecher from across the lane, who brought fresh eggs, always paused on Isaac's porch to cross herself before entering. "Son, don't stay in the back parlor after dusk," she cautioned, her eyes aflame with memory. "That room remembers too much. Eli used to play there, didn't he?" He nodded, smile faltering. "Do you think the house holds things?" She shivered. "Merrow Hill has hungry ground, Isaac. Sounds that never fade. You take care they don't remember more than you wish." That night, Isaac couldn't help himself. He sat in the back parlor with his mother's old notebook, reading entries about Eli's kindness, their games, and a final note. He said someone called him from under the hill, said the hill sang his name, The storm that blew in after midnight battered the old house and rattled window panes. Isaac, half asleep at the piano, woke with a start footsteps overhead, dragging slowly, then breaking into a run like a child playing a midnight game. He froze. Dirt sifted down between floorboards, and a high, breathless laugh whirled past his ears. He called out, "Eli?" And every echo in the house whispered back, "Ellie, Ellie, Ellie." Days stretched, repeating with odd gaps. Isaac found himself waking in locked rooms, piano sheet music torn and rearranged into strange, looping phrases nobody living could write. He dreamed of Eli, a boy of 12, muddy boots, gleaming with life, standing at the edge of the woods, waving for him to follow. One dusk, Isaac wandered after the memory, out behind the house where the orchard once grew. The ground sloped away into a tumble of rocks and briars, reaching the mouth of a black, breathless cave. Here, the air thrummed not with the crisp quiet of the soaked earth, but with a vibration like a child humming beneath his breath. The cave's walls shimmered with stalactites veined in green and amber. Deeper in, Isaac thought he saw movement, the ripple of feet, as if a ghostly child played hide and seek in the dark. And through the hush, a voice sang the old melody. "Come, hear my song. I'm not alone." Tears froze on Isaac's cheeks. He turned to run, but the rocks underfoot shifted, compressed by years of footsteps. Laughter, mourning. In town the next day, Isaac spoke to old Hugh, who'd worked the mines when Eli was young. "They say echoes live in the halls, you know," Hugh muttered after his third pint. "Some call Marrow Hill a spirit trap, buried sounds, not ghosts like in stories, the real kind, made of longing and things left unsaid. Eli never did leave. Not really. Haunted but emboldened. Isaac planned his final act, a musical offering to the past. He set up microphones in every room, tuned his mother's first piano, then played the melody from memory, note by trembling note. The house shook, the wind howled, and every note was met by another, slightly out of time, a duet with the lost. As he played, the house responded. Shadows elongated, faces blinked in glass, and the choir of whispers finally aligned with his own. When the last note faded, silence blossomed, not empty, but a tapestry of memory. That night, Isaac dreamed of walking through every hallway with Eli at his side. They spoke of forgiveness, of pain and laughter, and the soft peace that comes when secrets are sung and heard. In the dream, Eli beckoned him to the heart of Marrow Hill. "Don't let it fill with longing," Eli said, voice steady as a prayer. "Make a home with your sound. Let me go." In the morning, the air was lighter. Fog lifted from the woods. The birds above the marsh called to each other as if spring had finally begun. Isaac packed his suitcase, leaving behind tapes of new music and the cleaned, unhushed house. He knew he could never sell Marrow Hill, not because of ghosts, but because echoes are a kind of memory that ask to be honored, not erased. As he left, he sang the family song, loud and clear, and for the first time, another voice joined in joyous harmony, fading with the wind, Across the fields, the old mines groaned quietly. Marrow Hill echoed, not with grief but gratitude. Sometimes, in late summer, returning hikers swear they hear music under the birches, a brother's promise made whole. At last. Story 3. The Mirror in Langston Manor. Langston Manor had always been a place of whispered secrets, a sprawling Victorian estate perched on the edge of Greymore Village. Its windows like watchful eyes, its walls thick with the echoes of forgotten voices. For generations, the manor had been both a home and a prison, its tangled history entwining with the residents who dared live within. Evelyn Green returned to Langston Manor after 2 decades away, summoned by the unexpected death of her grandmother, Alice. The woman had been the last to hold the manor's key, the last to live its legacy, yet in her final letter, Alice had left behind only one request: look deeper and never trust what you see. Evelyn, a professor of folklore and ancient history, approached the manor not with fear, but with a burning curiosity. Years of study had taught her that stories, no matter how strange, often grew from slivers of truth hidden deep beneath legend and superstition. Arrival. The day Evelyn arrived was gray and heavy, the sky hanging low and full of rain. The village of Greymore looked like a photograph, frozen in time, cobblestone streets, shuttered shops and lampposts, faded to iron bone. Heads turned as she passed. Eyes lingered. In cautious recognition, the manor loomed behind twin rows of ancient oaks, their skeletal branches scratching at low clouds. The gate, oxidized and rusted, creaked on reluctant hinges. Nestled behind a garden long surrendered to ivy and brambles, the quote, manor's facade was cracked and mottled with moss. The scent was of damp stone and old wood, so dense it seemed to seep through Evelyn's boots. Inside, the house smelled of dust and faint lavender, her grandmother's favorite scent, Evelyn recalled. Light dappled through stained glass windows, casting fractured rainbows onto faded tapestries and cracked portraits. The air trembled with silence, a silence that felt alive as memory. Evelyn's footsteps echoed through the vast entrance hall. She found the drawing room exactly as she'd imagined from childhood. Heavy velvet curtains, a gilded mirror with a tarnished frame, and a grand fireplace choked with ash. On the mantel lay a folded note in Alice's delicate handwriting. The mirror holds more than reflection. Beware its gaze, for it may show not what is, but what could be or should not be. Trust your heart over your eyes. Intrigued, Evelyn moved to examine the mirror, an ornate piece nearly as tall as a person, its edges carved with twisting vines and strange, almost runic flourishes. Her own reflection shimmered faintly as she leaned closer, but beneath the surface, something seemed to ripple, as if a second world lurked behind the glass. The first night, that evening, lightning flickered beyond the manor's tall windows. The house groaned under the weight of a gathering storm, and Evelyn lit candles that danced in the drafty corridors. Sleep felt elusive, not for lack of tiredness, but because of the subtle disturbances. Footsteps just out of sight, a distant whisper curling around corners, shadows flickering in the periphery not quite cast by candlelight, drawn by a chill. Evelyn wandered into the library where shelves sagged beneath 1,000 leather-bound volumes. There, reflected in a small hand mirror on the desk, she saw something else. A face behind her own pale, unblinking, sorrowful. She spun around, breath caught, but no one was there. The mirror on the mantel, however, seemed unchanged. Or was it? The reflection's secret. Over the next days, the manor revealed more of its riddles. The mirror would show Evelyn visions brief moments from other times, and places, fragments of conversation, ghostly figures cloaked in shadow. At times, it reflected rooms she had not been in. Other times, it showed moments from her life, but twisted events that never happened or that might have been. One night, the mirror's surface rippled and parted like water, revealing a dim corridor she did not recognize. Compelled to touch it, Evelyn reached forward, fingers grazing the cold glass, and for a moment was pulled through. She found herself standing in a Langston manor she had never known but felt intimately familiar. Brighter rooms, laughter, reverberating in spaces long forgotten. She heard voices, children's laughter, a distant piano playing a familiar melody. Her grandmother used to sing. Voices called her name. A pale boy with eyes too old smiled and vanished down a hall. She snapped back to the present, heart pounding, gasping for breath. The candle's flame flickered and steadied. Had she dreamed it? Or had the mirror truly opened a window between worlds? Discoveries in the attic. Driven to understand, Evelyn explored the manor's attic, a labyrinth of trunks, forgotten memorabilia, and dust-covered paintings. She uncovered a hidden diary belonging to Clara Langston, a girl who had disappeared in 1897 at the manor's height of fortune and tragedy. Clara wrote of a silver glass, a mirror not simply for reflection but for vision, a bridge between the living and the lost. Her entries grew desperate, fear of faces behind the glass, who whispered secrets and begged release. She described a pact with a shadowy presence, binding her family to the manor's fate. Evelyn felt a chill running down her spine as she read the final line, hastily scrawled, "Only the true-hearted can close the mirror's wound, or be trapped within forever." The haunted soiree. That night, the manor changed. The storm outside broke with wild force, rain pelting walls like a drum. Evelyn felt an eerie pull toward the drawing room and found herself not alone. Figures emerged from shadow shimmering, translucent, dressed in finery from a forgotten era. They moved silently, faces glowing with pale light. One woman, her eyes empty pools of sorrow, reached out a hand that nearly brushed Evelyn's. A man in a tailcoat offered a silent bow. She realized it was a ghostly soiree echoes of a night long past, trapped in the mirrored plane. The piano began to play by itself, notes quivering through the air like cold hands. Some spirits approached the mirror, fading in and out of reflection. Others whispered warnings, "Guard it well." The silver glass hungers. Stay true or become lost. Overwhelmed, Evelyn retreated, but the manor itself seemed to resist. Doors slammed, windows rattled, and the mirror's surface wavered crazily. A legacy revealed, begging the spirits for answers. Evelyn was shown memories, Clara's life, The Langston family's secrets, a curse laid by jealous rivals. Involving the mirror as a conduit, the mirror's otherworldly power fed on secrets and lies, growing with each generation, binding the family tighter to the manor's shadow. To break the curse, Evelyn needed to find the mirror's twin, a counterpart hidden somewhere in the manor grounds, known only through cryptic clues left by Clara. The final trial, guided by ghostly visions and her own intuition, Evelyn followed a trail of symbols etched into the floorboards and wallpaper patterns, until she reached a hidden crypt beneath an ancient oak outside the manor. There, she found the twin mirror, cracked but shimmering faintly. Returning to the manor, Evelyn prepared for the ritual Clara had described in her diary. Candles flickered as she positioned the mirrors, opposite each other, shadows stretching between. She recited an incantation in an old tongue, her voice steady despite the unseen. Eyes watching, the room trembled. The mirror in the drawing room screamed with light and shadow, the boundary between worlds thinning to a fragile veil. Evelyn steeled herself and gazed into the silver glass. She saw not one reflection, but two, her own and Clara's. The trapped souls of the Langston family reached out, some pleading, some menacing. With effort and will, Evelyn commanded the mirrors to close the gate, binding the spectral echoes and severing the manor's curse. Light exploded, the mirror's surface cracking before it went dark and lifeless. Dawn and release. As the first dawn light poured through the stained glass, the manor sighed its heavy silence, lifting. The phantoms dissolved into gentle mists of peace. Evelyn felt the house breathe easier. The weight of centuries lifted. Packing to leave, she took with her Clara's diary and a small shard from the mirror, a reminder of the thin line between past and present. Graymore awoke, no longer shrouded in shadows cast by Langston Manor. Evelyn drove away, the silver glass's curse broken. But in her rearview mirror, the manor's windows flickered once, like a last, grateful blink. You've been listening to Scary Sleep Stories. May your dreams be calm and your night undisturbed.